Welcome to the Southwest Neighborhoods Assembly. Very important meeting. Meet the candidates for the DC council member, the at-large council members. I'm Donna Burgess. I'm president of the Southwest Neighborhood Assembly. Many of you who are joining us probably know a lot about us, but for those of you who don't, the Southwest Neighborhood Assembly was founded in 1964 and has been very active all these years. We're a nonprofit organization. We are run 100% by volunteers. We have very active task forces that work to fulfill our mission to serve the residents of Southwest DC. We work to improve the quality of life for all residents, to open to every resident the wide cultural horizon of urban living, and we strive to keep residents informed on current issues by offering monthly community meetings, usually at Arena Stage, and by publishing our local newspaper, The Southwestern. The forum today is offered as an educational effort to afford residents to hear and connect to the candidates for the position of DC at-large council member. SWANA is a 501c3 nonprofit, and as such, we do not endorse any political candidate, but we feel it's important to afford our residents the opportunity to meet the candidates so that they can make, or you can make, an informed decision when you vote. The at-large council member is very important to all of us. At-large is a designation for members of the governing body of the council who are elected and appointed to represent the whole city rather than just one ward. And I want to take this opportunity to thank our moderator, Fennett Nipperell. Did I say your name right?
Fennett Nipperell.
Nipperell, right. Thank you, Fennett, of the Washington Post, and the amazing team that helped put us together. Carlton Julian is our technology wizard, and Bianca Crescelius is our event planner. And as a side note, Bianca was a recipient of a SWANA scholarship when she went to Penn State. She's a graduate of Benjamin Banneker High School, a graduate of Penn State. And we're very fortunate that she's still living in Southwest and she's giving back to her community. I'm going to introduce you now to Bianca, who will kind of give you the rules of the road. I hope you listen. I hope you ask a lot of questions, and I hope you get the answers that you're looking for. Bianca?
Hi, everyone. Good evening, and thank you, Donna, for that introduction. I am Bianca Crescelius. I am the SWANA event planner, and I am also the owner and lead planner of Crescelius Creations, which is an event planning business here in the district that I launched earlier this year. I also would like to give a special thanks to all of our candidates who are joining us this evening, as well as our moderator, Fennett Nipperell. We are definitely grateful to have all of your participation, and we look forward to tonight's evening. So before Fennett introduces all of our candidates, I would like to address some ground rules for the panel Q&A. For the introductions, each candidate will have up to 2 minutes to give their opening statements and their introductions. From there, the panel will begin. Fennett will address all of the questions to each candidate. Some questions may be generalized for everyone to answer. Some of them may be directly pointed to specific candidates to address. And while the panel is going on, audience members have access to the chat box to simply chat in or ask any questions to the designated candidates of their choice. And for each candidate, regarding your response, you will have up to 1 minute to respond to each question. And Fennett, I would like to let you know that you are able to use your own discretion if you feel the need to give candidates more time for a specific question. We are allowing you to do that and to utilize your discretion. And moving along from that, each candidate, like I said, will have 2 minutes for introductions. They will have up to 1 minute to answer questions. And I just ask that everyone be respectful of each other's time and be mindful of time. And without further ado, that's my special segment. And I will kick it off to Fennett to start off tonight's panel. Thank you.
All right, thank you for having me. So as they mentioned, I'm a reporter with the Washington Post and I cover DC government. So whoever wins this race is likely going to have to deal with me asking them even more questions once they're in office as a council member. So my goal tonight is to help voters better understand their choices in the at-large race and what distinguishes the candidates apart from each other in a very large field. And because of the large amount of candidates this evening, we're going to have some questions where all the candidates answer and some where only select candidates will answer, with the goal of giving everyone equal time tonight. And as a reminder to those tuning in, we only have a portion of the 20 plus candidates who are running in the office with us this evening, and there will be additional forums with the remaining candidates tomorrow and on Wednesday night. So to start, each candidate will get to make a 2-minute opening statement, and we're going to go in alphabetical order, starting with Claudia Berrigan.
In 1987, and I'm the only candidate with 20 years of expertise in urban planning, community development, land use, zoning, and environmental policy. I bring unique technical skill sets that others just do not have. I am an elected ANC in Ward 5. I am also a former policy staff member for Councilmember Trayon White. I have shown actions, not promises. In a decade, I drafted over 40 bills, 28 of which became law. I amended the comp plan by establishing equitable development policies in transportation, housing, education, employment, health, and cultural preservation. That is my platform, my work over the last 20 years. So I really appreciate this opportunity to be able to speak to the Southwest community.
Thank you, Claudia. It looks like we missed out on the very first part of your opening statement. If you just want to just do you a basic introduction of who you are again. Sure.
Like I mentioned, so my name is Claudia Barragan. I came here when I was in 1987, and when I was 10 years old, I migrated to the district area. I'm an urban planner, and I bring that particular skill set that no one else has in council, and none of the other candidates have. I've done some work in Southwest, actually, in a neighborhood back in 2010. So I'm really happy to be here.
All right. Thank you. And we're having technical difficulties with another candidate, so we're going to go ahead with Calvin Gurley to make his opening statement. Mr. Gurley, you can begin. And bear with us while we navigate the strange world of virtual candidate forums. Right, it appears that Mr. Gurley is not here with us, so we're going to go ahead and have Mario Cristaldo with his opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me there?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, it's so good to be here and talk about this very important issue that we're facing all together. My name is Mario Cristaldo, and I'm running for DC City Council at large at this point.
Mr. Gurley is not here with us, so we're going to go ahead and have Mario Cristaldo with his opening statement.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me there?
Yes.
Okay, I lost you there for a minute, but I think I'm back to you now. I'm very happy to be here. I've been I'm originally from Paraguay. I moved to DC in 1994 as a young professional trying to change the world, like a lot of us here in the District of Columbia. Today, after 25 years of that, I've been a community organizer. I've been fighting for living wages. I've been working in affordable housing, and most recently, I've been an executive for a nonprofit housing a developer providing housing for seniors, and also working for the wellness and the welfare of seniors in the District of Columbia. So I have all this experience is what I'm bringing in this election at this time. So I'm very happy to be here tonight.
Apologies. Thank you for your opening statement. Next up is Vincent Orange.
Council member, DC Democratic National Committee man, president of the PEPCO region, and chief financial officer of the National Children's Center Incorporated, and a tax accountant at Arthur Anderson and Company. During my elected office, I had the opportunity to work with Mayor Anthony Williams and Chairperson Linda Kropp and the council to eliminate the control board and to build a rainy day fund, which has helped the district financially survive the Great Recession, the federal shutdown, and now the coronavirus. However, we're on the verge of a financial collapse, and that's why I'm running, because we must do it again and come back better. I'm running to provide mature, experienced leadership, institutional knowledge, and sound judgment to plan and execute the successful comeback of the district for the benefit and general welfare of its citizens and businesses, and to define the new normal in DC caused by coronavirus, civil unrest, and a severely damaged DC economy. I'm number 2 on the ballot, and I humbly ask for your vote on Tuesday, November 3rd, 2020. Together, DC, we can come back better.
All right, thank you, Mr. Orange. Next up is Monica Palacio, and I'm going to ask for you to wait until I give you the all clear to go ahead with your opening statement, because we have had a bit of a delay with some of the candidates in their opening statements.
Hi.
All right, we have you. You may begin.
Great. Thank you so much. My name is Monica Palacio. I am candidate for DC Council at Large. I'm really thrilled to be with you all tonight and to hear the concerns and issues that SWANA's members and also our residents in the Southwest neighborhoods are thinking about and want to know about from us, your candidates. I've been in the district for 30 years. I moved to DC to go to law school in 1990, and that's when I began my work serving our communities. I worked with incarcerated parents, youth affected by violence, and trying to keep young people out of the juvenile justice system. Most recently, I served as director of the Office of Human Rights under Mayor Gray and then Mayor Bowser. And the Office of Human Rights is the district's civil rights enforcement agency. So for 6 years, I oversaw thousands of cases and hundreds of investigations relating to discrimination in employment, housing, access to government services, and education. So I have been on the front lines serving thousands of district residents for many years now. I'm so thrilled to be running for office. I'm the first Latina that registered and announced to run in the district. And I think that it's very important that we have true representation across the district. All neighborhoods, all communities, all residents deserve representation on the council, and the Latino community and the immigrant community has never had a voice elected to office here in the city. So it's incredibly important that we not only prioritize having true representation, but also my top 3 issues, which are working on housing, education, and public safety. Thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thank you. Next up with an opening statement is Eric Rogers, and I'll remind you, wait until I give the all clear before beginning your opening statement. All right, you may begin. Oh, I'm sorry, you appear to be muted.
There we go. Is that better?
There you go.
Hi, folks. My name is Eric Rogers. I, too, am a candidate for the at-large seat for the D.C. City Council. I'm a native Washingtonian with over 2 decades of experience in local government. I, too, worked in the City Council as a legislative aide for Councilmember Sharon Ambrose, who was the Ward 6 City Council member, who, in fact, I was the staff person who was in charge of redistricting, which brought in your part of the city into Ward 6. So I've met a lot of you over the years doing that work. Also, I was chief of staff for Kevin Chavis, who is a Ward 7 City Council member. For the last decade or so, I've been a deputy director at the Department of Consumer and Regulatory Affairs, right up the street from you, dealing with business and professional licensing. So I was the city's main licensing director. So if you've gotten a license in the last few years, I'm the guy that issued it to you. Hopefully it went through without any hangups. But also I was the chief of staff at the Department of Small Local Business Development, as well as Mayor Bowser's first taxi cab commissioner. I go through all of that history to demonstrate that I too have the experience necessary to help solve a lot of the most pressing challenges that we have in our city. And my values are simple, nothing complicated. I accept people for who they are. I build networks of support, and I create communities of shared wealth. And I do believe by working together, some of the issues that I do want to work on if elected is ensuring that every child has a quality education that prepares them for the jobs of today and tomorrow. Revamp our workforce development system to ensure residents have access to quality jobs. And more importantly, reinvest in our locally owned small businesses, especially since the pandemic has decimated a lot of our small business industries, so that every resident has access to quality jobs. We could do all of this through building a better DC, but it requires all of us to be engaged. And I hope through this conversation, you'll see that I am the best candidate to choose. And I look forward to all of your questions.
Thank you, Eric. Next up is Councilmember Robert White.
Am I good to go?
You're good to go, Councilmember.
Thank you. Good evening. I want to thank the Southwest Neighborhood Assembly for having me. I'm at-large council member Robert White. I'm serving my first term here on the council. I'm a husband, father of 2 little girls, and a 5th-generation Washingtonian. I'm a lawyer by training. I spent many years as legislative counsel to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton. When I had the privilege and the honor of working on Capitol Hill for our city, what I noticed was that the city had hit a stride that most of us thought we would never hit. But in our best times, my family was not doing any better than we were doing in the city's worst times. So while I'm a lawyer, I come from a family of hourly wage workers who have struggled for decades in this city. And I determined that I could do more to help people like my family on the local level than I could on the federal level. So I made that leap. In the council, I've set an aggressive agenda. When I got elected 4 years ago, I knew that it wasn't enough to get your vote. I developed a plan, a transition plan. I put it in writing and told everyone what I intended to do in my first 4 years with your vote. We have hit almost every single and accomplished almost every single aspect of that plan. But the challenges have changed before us. We are now faced with COVID and really at the intersection of racial justice, the most important time on racial justice in our country since the 1960s. This is a place where I've led because I've shown that I can pull communities together, that I can set an agenda and get it done, and that I will work for the people to be your voice. Too often, people have felt like the government is not focused on them, but is focused on other things like growth and people we hope to come. I want to continue to be a council member serving you, serving your needs, serving our communities. I'm Robert White. I'm asking for one of your 2 votes on November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Our final opening statement will be delivered by Ann Wilcox. You're ready to go.
Okay, thank you very much, Bennett. Good, glad you made it back from Portland.
Thank you.
My name is Ann Wilcox, and I'm the DC Statehood Green Party candidate for the at-large race. I'm a longtime DC resident, came here in the 1980s as a college intern, and then I also went to law school here at American University in the 1980s. I did live in Southwest, actually, for about 5 years. I love the neighborhood down there, the diversity, the compact nature of the community, and it's also well served by transportation with the blue and the green lines. So it's a great little neighborhood with arts as well. I am, as I said, an attorney. I was on the DC Commission for Women early in my career. I was appointed by Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly. I was also elected to the DC School Board, serving Ward 2, and that was part of the time I lived in Southwest. Ward 2 was part of Southwest at that time. Now it's part of Ward 6. So that was a good chance to get some education experience. I've also worked with the National Lawyers Guild with a group of progressive lawyers, and I serve on some committees with the DC Bar, the DC Affairs community. So I do some public service work through the DC Bar. I am supporting the DC Statehood Green Party in this race, and we're a progressive party that really supports a range of public interest issues, affordable housing, support for public education, health equity, and a whole range of progressive issues. Of course, statehood is our #1 issue, so we always center DC statehood. So again, I'm glad to be here for this discussion. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And that's all of our opening statements. So we're now going to move to questions. So the first question I have is for all the candidates. Like many states and cities across the country, the DC government is expected to face continued budget challenges due to the coronavirus pandemic. So for the candidates here tonight, what, if any, area of DC government do you see as ripest for cuts? And what, if any, measures should the city take to raise revenue? Each candidate has 1 minute to answer, and the order has been chosen randomly. Again, the question is, what area of government do you see as the ripest for cutting spending? And what, if any, measures should the city take to raise revenue? We'll start with Eric Rogers. You may start.
Okay. I think one of the areas that I would look at are O funds. It's an esoteric area of the government, but it's our special purpose revenue funds, our savings accounts for different programs. Typically, every year, the government has surpluses in those funds. And in looking at this year's and last year's budget, that's one area that I would look at to kind of cut down or take some of the money to help plug some of the budget gaps. As it relates to raising revenue, I would look at a lot of our fees and the collection of a lot of our fees. I've read a report earlier about some of our civil infractions where we're not collecting the amount of revenue that we should be collecting based off of bad business practices and so on and so forth. So for the short time that I have to answer the question, those are 2 areas that I would look at immediately as soon as I get into office to try to plug some of that budget gap.
Thank you. Next up is Vincent Orange.
We're a $16 billion government. We have to make sure that those dollars circulate in the city. And for example, our expendable budget is $2 billion, but we will do $1 billion of work with people that are outside the city that are not subject to DC taxation, and we get nothing back into the kitty. So if we start doing business with DC businesses, we freeze raises, freeze hiring, and then scrub all the budgets of the government, as well as work with the federal government, we may be in a position where we don't have to actually cut. We just have to maintain the status quo while we jumpstart the economy. So my understanding that we're close to coming to an agreement where the city will receive the $795 million from the federal government that we will shortchange. And then there is a push by Councilmember McDuffie to have at least 50% of that amount, or $400 million, utilized to jumpstart the DC economy.
Thank you, Councilmember Orange. Thank you, former Councilmember Orange. Next up will be Councilmember Robert White, and I'll remind the candidates to wait until I give you the all clear to start your answer because there is a bit of a lag. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much. We have to, in a time like this, really separate the need to have projects from the good to have projects. There are some things that we would love to do, like the K Street Transit Way and an extension of the streetcar, which we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars on, that we don't have to do right now, one of the tightest economic times that our city has seen. We may have to, if we cannot sufficiently audit our existing programs, we actually waste a ton of money, have to do a better job of auditing. That should offset any need to increase taxes. But should we need to, we will need to make a modest tax increase on our highest wage earners, many of whom pay the same tax rate as our low wage earners. What this shows is that we actually could increase taxes for wealthy people by really only a couple $100s a year, but raise many millions of dollars that we can put into programs that are going to be desperately needed. Because the reality is the people at the bottom of the income scale are feeling this pandemic so much harder than those of us at the higher end of the income scale. But we are all in this together. And so this is the time where people who have more are going to have to give a little more. That's what we do as a community.
Thank you, Councilmember. Next up is Ann Wilcox.
Yes, thank you. The State of Green Party and myself also support a reversing order called the Trump tax cuts. There were local tax cuts that sort of tracked the Trump national tax cuts. So we support reversing that, which would provide more revenue for those that can afford that. Certainly the upper 10% can afford to pay more. I believe there is also aspects of the rainy day fund that could be used. But most importantly, we do need to keep education and human services funding level as much as possible. And we would definitely cut the vanity projects, the McMillan Park development, which isn't necessary. It should be maintained as a green space in any case. So why budget $75 million in capital money to develop McMillan? And also things like the streetcar, which is an unnecessary form of transportation, duplicating bus lines. So we would, again, reverse the Trump tax cuts and cut those developer subsidies. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up is Mario Cristaldo. The question is, what areas of DC government do you see as ripest for spending cuts, and what, if any, measures should be taken to raise revenue?
Am I ready now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, I was waiting for you. Well, most definitely, I think we need to increase taxes on citizens in the district making more than $250,000 in app. That would be a very good way of helping folks in the bottom part of the economic ladder and strengthen our tax base, as a matter of fact. And another aspect that I would look into is pushing, and working with the federal government in terms of some of the dollars that have been designated to us and not being received. We all know the latest issue that we're facing with the federal government not being treated as a state. So the issue of statehood really is very important to us in that aspect. So we need to free ourselves from the federal government in terms of our budget. And it's rainy day, guys. It's pouring rainy day now. So we need to look into the actually our rainy day funds to be able to fund some of the projects that we really need in the community in terms of real affordable housing and some others.
Thank you. Next up is Monica Palacio.
Thank you. I think I'm on. So I believe this election is about saving lives and protecting families. In terms of cuts, in my role as director of the Office of Human Rights, I conducted audits on agencies. I was an enforcement agency, and I bring some X-ray vision and experience into the ways that we can cut into agency budgets. in terms of the savings and the way that they are able to delay funding and save that funding for special projects. So I know that we can make cuts. In terms of revenue, I would like to explore a mini bond or a micro bond program where residents who have the income can buy into buying bonds for the city to help us bounce back, and then get those bonds, get the return on their bonds when we move into more economically abundant times.
Thank you. And last is Claudia Barragan. Can you, how do you pronounce your name? I don't want to butcher it again.
That's okay, Barragan.
Barragan, all right.
Barragan.
What's your answer to the DC budget question?
Yes. So I think in terms of cutting and spending, one of the most frustrating things that I've seen in council is how the bills and a lot of the programs that are being introduced are not targeted. They're very general, so they end up becoming costly bills. I think right now is definitely a time to be more targeted. We have the data, we have a lot of information that we can really focus down on specific people, specific groups within the city. For example, DOT is one of the areas. Like they're spending a lot of money on really large areas as far as biking, for example. If we were to narrow it down to specific groups that could increase their biking use, then we start using the money properly. In terms of where we're overspending, right now we're overspending in contracting. DPW, for example, since 2010, they have overspent close to $54 million on undercharging private trash haulers. I live really close to Port Houghton transfer station. I actually live like walking distance, and our alleyways, they're not clean at all. We have to endure all of the trash from the entire city. And meanwhile, they're like literally they're undercharging private corporations that come through our neighborhood all the time by $54 million. We need to address those issues. And we can also address environmental benefits as well.
Thank you so much. So we're now going to move to our first rapid fire round, where I'm going to ask the candidates to answer by raising their hands. We now have all 7 candidates who are here with us tonight visible on the screen. So at my discretion, I'm then going to ask individual candidates who disagree on these questions to expand on their positions. So there will be an opportunity for some candidates to answer beyond just a raised hand. So to start off, raise your hand if you approve of Mayor Muriel Bowser's job performance. All right. Now raise your hand if you approve of Police Chief Newsom's job performance. So no hands for approval of Police Chief Newsom's performance. All right. Raise your hand if you support mayoral control of DC public schools. Does no one here support mayoral control of DC schools?
Mayoral control of the schools.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, control, yeah.
Control of the schools.
Mayoral control of schools is what I'm asking about. Raise your hand if
Hard to
you
hear you
support
on that one.
Yeah, it sounded like you were saying something else.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to break. So we'll start. We saw some splits on the question of mayoral control of schools and Mayor Bowser's job performance. So I'll start off by asking about Mayor Bowser's job performance. Monica Palacio, you served in Mayor Bowser's cabinet. What do you think about her tenure so far?
I think Mayor Bowser has done an excellent job on many issues, and it's a tremendously challenging position. But I can tell you from my personal experience, I would receive handwritten notes on memos that I delivered to her, and I know that she worked tirelessly to be responsive and adapt and make sure that we as agencies had the support of her office. I also think the Department of Health and the work we've done on the COVID response has been really in the top tier of the nation. DC has really been protected from the worst of COVID, and I think that's due to the leadership of Dr. Nesbitt, to the deputy mayors, and to Mayor Bowser.
Thank you. Councilmember Robert White, you sit on the council right now. Why don't you approve of the mayor's job performance?
So look, that's a very general question. I don't disagree with everything the mayor does, and I do want to commend her on how she has handled the COVID-19 pandemic. This has been a very challenging issue. But when I look at issues like racial justice, where I think we as a city have had the opportunity to lead, the mayor has not been as progressive and as thoughtful as I would like to see. This is a time where people need to feel the empathy of a government who understands how far behind we are on an issue of racial justice. But it also connects with the way that people, everyday people in this city feel. They feel like their government is focused too much on a distant dream, too much on people we want to come to this city, and not enough on the people and the families who are here now. And so I think that has hurt our city. And so look, like with anybody else, there are times where the mayor and I agree. There are times where we don't agree. I do think that we'd be in a healthier place if the administration was less political. We would be more productive because there's so much more that we can do together.
Thank you. Next up to weigh in on this, Vince Orange.
Well, I think the mayor is doing a great job. She's faced with President Trump in the White House, who she has to battle with and threatens her every other day that I'm going to take their money away from the city. But she's able to balance the budget. She had a great balance of 2020 and 2021. It came in almost toward the end of the fiscal year. She had no choice but to pull out the $772 million to balance 2020, and then also pull out $775 million to balance 2021. I'm comfortable with the mayor, with Jeff DeWitt, and with Kathy Patterson and Chairman Mendelson that we'll be able to move forward. She's also done extremely well with COVID-19. She's received great reviews, national reviews for the job that she's done there. And affordable housing, she's the one that's out front. She's increased the funding for the Housing Production Trust Fund, and she's also called for 35,000 units to be built. And I just want to say really quickly, I'm not in favor of getting rid of the police chief. So if that was the question, I think that the police chief and the police department over the years have done a great job in the city. I do not believe that a situation that happened with George Floyd would ever happen in DC. Should we be improving on our community policing? Yes. But I think that overall, DC, in terms of when you rank it with other states, that overall, we did a good job.
Thank you. Ann Wilcox, you ran against Mayor Bowser in 2018 on the statehood Green Party ticket. What do you think of her performance since 2018?
Yes, thank you. I did run. I got 20,000 votes 2 years ago. The mayor's a nice person. She's my neighbor now up in Erin Ward 4. And I agree that she has done a good job on the COVID response. She's been very attentive. She's been very kind, unlike our president. My problem with the mayor now is that she's very developer driven. It's where the developer dollars are coming from. And I also think she excuses poor performance by agencies far too often. You look at agencies like the Office of Unified Commands, which send ambulances to the wrong quadrant almost on a daily basis, or even DCRA, problems there, which Mr. Rogers could probably talk about. But I think she excuses poor performance by her agencies far too often, and she picks fights with people who try to criticize her.
Thank you. We'll now shift to the question of mayoral control of DC public schools. Eric Rogers, where do you stand on that issue?
I do, when I was working in the council, in the Committee on Education and Libraries under Kevin Chavis, we were the council that started the school governance debate and changes that we've had. I'm still in favor of mayoral control of schools, and this is the reason why. Because you do need that ability to jumpstart and make significant changes at the drop of a dime, meaning in a budget cycle. And one of the things that I'm really pleased that the mayor's done, at least in terms of public education, is looking to alternative forms of public education. Like, I love the partnership she has with Bard College, something that I'm going to be promoting if I ever get into the council, where folks graduate with a 2-year degree as opposed to a high school diploma. And I think having, an all-elected school board that focuses on curriculum, teacher standards, and the like is the proper place for the school board. But that administrative aspect of it, the actual spending of the dollars, making sure that the technology gets to the kids, I think it's better to have it under the control of a mayor. versus the obscure school governance structure that we had about 20 years ago, where you had a hybrid board and a school board and and the like. So.
All right, next up, Claudia Barragan. Where do you stand on this issue?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that it's not about the person, it's about the actions and the record. I'll give you a really good example as far as what the mayor has done in education. So about 5 years ago, I had been doing advocacy on language access for immigrant parents, specifically in education. And 6 years, and that particular bill, which really a lot of our headaches for it to pass without any support from her agency leads. It finally passed, but it was never funded. So she refused to fund the language access education for immigrants. Right now, in COVID, for virtual learning, I'm talking to these parents. And could you imagine what it's like to try to do virtual learning, not being able to read or write in English, and trying to help 4 kids who are going to all different schools, charters, public schools, some in Ward 7, some in Ward 8, some in Ward 1, and you don't know how to handle all this, and you're unemployed. All of that could have been avoided had she funded language access for education way when we told her to.
Thank you.
And I think that's understand.
Mario Cristaldo, where do you stand on the issue of mayoral control of DC schools?
I think I'm more into a balance, a power of that balance, and I think the mayor has too much power on the school system at this point, but she doesn't have enough time to focus only on that. I mean, I think in order for us to have a better control of the system, we need a strong school board, and it's more about what we can do with the elected official of the school board. We went too far when taking half of our school boards appointed by the mayor and the council as supposed to be all elected. So that's the bigger issue that I have, and then also of the rating of Latinos, high school Latinos. I'm not the rate is pretty low in terms of. And we haven't seen her focus on that. Those are the issues that I have. Overall, I think we can in that front with the mayor.
Thank you very
Overall,
much.
I understand too. That, she's doing a good. And then just very quickly, I also believe that the community policing, she needs to do a better job on that.
We'll have more. We'll talk more about that later in the forum. So to transition to the next question, which will also be for all candidates.
Mayoral control.
Mayor control.
Well, Mr.
We're not having all the candidates answer all the questions. So that's
you
why
did say the ones we voted against, we'd have an opportunity to explain.
Okay, I'll have Councilmember White weigh in on this.
Thank you. Since I did oppose it. So look, as a lawyer, the thing that separates me from everybody else in my family is just education, right? And so when I look at a school system where in English language, 85% of white students are proficient, but only 25% of Black students, and math, only 21% of Black students are proficient versus 79% of white students. And folks leading the school saying, look how good we're doing. We're doing the exact right thing. That is so unfair to these little Black and brown boys and girls in this city that deserve so much more. They deserve somebody who will step up and say, no, we are not doing everything right. And so there has to be really a separation from politics. There has to be more direct accountability to voters, to communities. And that is somewhere where we have fallen way short in mayoral control. And I think the fact of the matter is folks would support mayoral control if students of color were doing better and if we were more honest that they are not doing that well in our schools right now.
We've been through this 20 years.
All right, since we're having an actual debate here on this issue, I'm going to keep this going. So, Vince Orange, what's your response to Robert White?
Well, first of all, that's the reason why we need institutional knowledge on the council.
Exactly.
When I came onto the council, it took me 2 years to get a simple bill passed for our children to get books and core materials by the second week of school. And that was under the school board.
Exactly.
The school board went berserk just trying to give our kids books for their core subjects. And these were our children at the better school, Banneker and School Without Walls, complaining in the month of May by not having their core materials in schools out in June. Working with Councilmember Vincent Gray and others, we've been able to pull all the early childhood children together, get 15,000 of them ready to move forward. We have the Birth for All initiative that we can move forward with. Clearly, there are problems, but we don't need to be talking about the structure. We need to talk about educating our children, reducing the digital divide. And I even had called for the council to come off the recess because you knew that 44% of our children did not have laptops, computers, did not have access to the internet, and yet we were engaged in distance learning. Now we see that 22,000 of those kids have not even been registered. So it's mayoral control with aggressive council oversight, which has been lacking. So we don't need to go back year.
So the mayoral control is the one who told us we were set for schools, told us not to change our budget because they had everything under control with the computers. We asked for the data, we couldn't get it. This is what you get with mayoral control.
You are the
But you get worse when you have the school board. 20 years ago when we had
we had an elected council and the city went bankrupt, but you're not saying to
Hold on, everyone. We're talking over each
when
other.
When you're in charge of the education committee, you have a lot of power and you can get that information. It's just folks coming together. All it takes is 7 votes, takes 9 votes. And you knew from Jump Street when you went on recess that 44% of our children did not have laptops.
That's not what the mayor told us.
They did not have access to
internet. We tried to vote funding. The mayor said, don't pass the funding. We've got it covered.
And yet the mayor in the past few days was able to come up with additional $3 million. He went and got Comcast and RCN to provide access to the internet for these children. So she is working and she needs the council to get on board so all of us can make sure that we are educating our children.
Thank you. I'm going to move to the next question now. And candidates, if you want to jump in, I will be happy to call in on you, but just to avoid people talking over each other, please raise your hands. And if there's an issue, if we want to keep the discussion going, I will keep the discussion going so that the audience here does have a better idea of where the candidates differ on the issues and their different approaches. So to segue off of one of the things that Vince Orange mentioned, a lot of the influence that council members have come from their committee assignments, and specifically what committee they chair, which allows them to be a gatekeeper to bills and to shape the budgets and conduct oversight of various agencies. So if you're elected, what kind of committee would you like to chair and why? Each candidate has 30 seconds for this answer, starting with Eric Rogers.
Oh, starting with me. Well, I'd love to chair the Finance and Revenue Committee. I'm not going to lie. You got to control the purse strings to make sure that all of the programs that we're talking about, whether it be schools, affordable housing, are properly funded. Having a stable budget and not allowing the control board to come up is a key issue for me. I came through the council as a staffer during the control board, so I understand what having effective oversight over the budget process and over the finances, how it can help the city. You look at where we are now from where we were 20 years ago in 2000 and 1999. It's that type of a time and attention that I hate that, Jack Evans, the finance and revenue had, that helped us to get to the point where we are now. So finance and revenue for me.
Thank you. Next up is Councilmember Robert White. I'm going to tweak the question slightly for you. What have you accomplished with your chairmanship of the committee on facilities and procurement?
Thank you. So we have jurisdiction over returning citizens' issues. I've more than doubled the size of that agency to make sure brothers and sisters coming back from incarceration have the resources they need. I have oversight over the Office of the ANC. I've increased their allotments for the first time in about a decade. I've added more shared services. I've gone around the city to meet with ANCs and given them resources that they've never had before. Our contracting is more transparent. I've stopped the process of sending contracts that have already been signed, done significant oversight. And right now I am working to take charge to make sure that our school buildings are safe and that there's a lead agency so that when students go to school, there's coordination between the buildings people, the schools people, and the health officials. That is something that our students deserve.
Next up is Monica Palacio. What kind of a committee would you like to chair?
I would love to chair the Committee on Public Safety and Justice because I think we need true reform in the ways that we intervene in any type of crisis. When our residents need help, they shouldn't be met with someone in a uniform with a gun. We need more crisis response systems that deal with mental health issues, drug and alcohol issues, and supporting families that need wraparound services so that children don't end up living on the street and going into further crisis. So the Committee on Public Safety and Justice to look at how to reform MPD and how to finally demilitarize any practices that lead to police brutality.
Thank you. And Wilcox, you're up next, and you have 30 seconds.
Okay, yes, I think the I think housing is still the most important issue facing the city. So I think affordable housing, the Committee on Housing would be the one I would want to chair. I think we need to expand rent control, make rent control effective, get rid of a lot of the loopholes, and also preserve our public housing, make that more healthy and safe and improved for citizens. And also expand housing through TOPA and other mechanisms. So that's the committee I would want. The Committee on Business Development would also be interesting because I think there's much too much support for developers, and I would want to moderate that quite a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Vince Orange. If you return to the council, what committee would you like to lead?
Okay. Well, I can tell you, I really would love to lead the Education Committee because I think we must educate our children. But where I'm needed most is the Finance and Revenue Committee. I am uniquely qualified as an attorney, CPA, Master of Laws in Taxation. I'm a former CFO for the National Children's Center. And I was there with Williams and Crop when we had to dig our ways out of that $518 million deficit, balance our budget for 4 consecutive years, and actually build the rainy day fund that's getting us through this current crisis. We need someone that can go to Wall Street, talk about our debt cap, talk about the rainy day fund, talk about the 7 deadly sins, and to make sure that we avoid a financial collapse.
Thank you.
We only have $149 million left in our rainy day fund.
Thank you. Next up is Claudia Barragan.
Yes, thank you. So as a planner, I would love to, and I think it's way over time for someone else to lead the Committee on Transportation and Environment. I think Councilmember Che, well, she's been there for a long time. We have not seen the change that we need in that department. Specifically DDOT. For example, DDOT, because of what they've done, we've increased the displacement of Black families in the district. We've gentrified the district. And Black males are leaving the district at a fast rate. And that's all at the hands of DDOT through their transfer-oriented development initiatives. Same thing with Sustainable DC and the third version is still racist and it's still discriminatory. So
thank you. Mario Cristaldo, what kind of committee do you have your eyes on?
I'm actually have my eyes on the Committee on Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization because I believe that housing is so crucial for people in the lower part of our economic system. Housing for low and moderate income families is crucial, and the mayor and this administration, they're only focusing on the higher end on the spectrum of affordable housing. We need more housing for millennials. We need more housing for low and moderate income families. As we all know, almost 20,000 Black residents have been displaced in this last 10 years due to this comprehensive plan that we have. And I want to focus on the comprehensive plan and the housing part as well.
Thank you. We're now going to move to another rapid fire round where I'm going to ask all candidates about several policy proposals that may come before the council and to raise their hand if they support these particular bills or policy ideas. And then, as was the case last time, we're going to, if we see areas of disagreement, we'll have candidates expand on their view. And I am keeping track of which candidates are getting extra time to answer these questions to ensure that there is equal time provided to all candidates. So to start off, candidates, please raise your hand if you support the proposal to add a 1.5 cent per ounce tax on soda and other sugar-sweetened beverages. Again, raise your hand if you support the proposal to impose an excise tax on sugary beverages. All right, looks like Claudia Barragan is the only one who supports that proposal. So Claudia, why don't you go ahead and explain why you support that proposal?
So our health, especially during COVID, is really has, for me at least, it's really made me more conscious about what I consume and the overall health impacts that has, and because it puts me at higher risk. I think it's really important for us to really on health issues across the city. And right now, we do need funding. We do need funding as much as possible. So I feel like that's an important.
Thank you. Ann Wilcox, why do you disagree?
I think that would punish young people and low-income people. I'm not in favor. Obviously, food deserts is a big problem. People should be able to get a cherry, not a cherry soda, when they're in the neighborhood. But I wouldn't want to punish people for a consumption tax like that. I'd rather maybe something like cigarettes or something that's a real vice.
Thank you. Before we move to the next question, is Vince Orange available? Because his camera is off.
Yes, I am.
Can you please turn your camera back on so we can see you raising your hand?
Sure.
All right. The next question, and this is relevant to Southwest. Would you support bringing back the Washington football team with taxpayers subsidizing infrastructure development as they did for Audi Field? Please raise your hand if you support bringing back Washington football with public subsidies. All right, looks like Vince Orange is the only one who supports it. So explain why you support that.
Well, I support it, and I would use as example Nats Park. Nats Park was about $600 million, and right now it is generating, that entire area is generating almost $700 million a year in tax revenue. And now when you add Audi Field and everything else that's going down in Southwest, it's going to be $1 billion in tax revenue real soon. The District of Columbia, we're unique. We're not a state yet. And so we have to create ways to generate revenue. And having the Washington football team back, if we fully develop that entire area, it's about 500 acres. So Washington football team is just one element of it. But you have DC Armory. You also have Langston Golf Course. You have the Children's Island. You have the parking lot. So there's a lot that we can do there. We just need a good comprehensive plan to make sure we have affordable housing, mixed-use development, and everything that's there to generate. We have to be like Abe Poland. He created CAP Center, MCI Center, but look what it's done for the city.
Thank you. Eric Rogers, what do you think of the issue of public subsidies for bringing back Washington football?
I'm tired of giving money to these folks. We'll just put it that way. MCI Center is a different circumstance. You have, 80 games plus 100 or so games between the Wizards and the Capitals. So you always have economic generation and economic activity every other night. You have 10 games at most, maybe 5 games or 5 additional events when you talk about big special events or what have you. The city needs to quit trying to spend money, with these big boys. If you're going to spend $150 million in infrastructure development, spend $150 million in infrastructure development where I live, Ward 7 and Ward 8, where we don't have adequate access to public transportation, where we can't get good quality, where we don't have access to foods and the like, because of our small business development is lacking. So if you're going to spend that type of money for economic development, spend the money for economic development that's going to benefit the most number of citizens, not for entertainment purposes. And I'm a season ticket holder. I love the Washington football team. Don't get me wrong, but this is not the time to be spending money with the big old boys so they can have fun and watch, 22 guys go and hit each other while we have folks dying in the street who need money. So no, I'm not supporting that.
Thank you. It looked like Mario Cristaldo wanted to weigh in on this issue too.
Absolutely. I totally remember when we started thinking about just giving $700 million to the project. We ended up giving a lot more than that, almost over $900 million. And then what is the money? And then we have all the number of residents that have been displaced from so many areas. I think we need to rethink about how we can use our dollars, our hard-earned dollars, more effectively. And I agree that we can invest better those dollars better in our communities and ourselves than on those folks. As a matter of fact, I also support a team and everything, but I think they can do it themselves at this time.
Thank you. So I'm going to move to the next question, which is about ranked choice voting. This field with 20 plus candidates has had a lot of voters and activists raising the question of, would the district be better suited with ranked choice voting that allows for candidates to rank for voters to rank their top choices and for an instant runoff? So do you support such a system in DC? Raise your hand if you do.
What's that again? Could you repeat that question, please?
Raise your hand if you support ranked choice voting in the district.
Too complicated for folks.
Okay, so Monica Palacio, why do you support it? Sorry, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I'm one of the candidates that's participating in the Fair Elections Program, which I think is fine. This is the first year it's been into place. It's leveling the playing field so that people like me who have never had wealth and who have a modest income can run for office. We're going to see more and more people running like we have in this race. So yes, let's give the voters the opportunity to list their choices in order of preference so that we can immediately have a clear victory for the top voice,
Robert
the
White,
top
where do you
vote
stand on
getters.
this?
Thank you. So I agree that, there is an issue with so many people running. You can have somebody elected who does not have a plurality or even necessarily a significant percentage of the vote. However, ranked choice voting has a number of issues that need to be explored further. For instance, many people who support one candidate may and likely will bullet vote just for that candidate. So I don't know that ranked choice voting gets us to an accurate conclusion. We need to look at something like instant runoff or some other tool that allows us to make sure we get the people that voters really want, but not something that's going to inspire a different problem, which is bullet voting.
And Wilcox, what's your response to the concern raised by Robert White about bullet voting?
Well, I think, people are going to do that. Obviously, that's a drawback, but the ranked choice voting and instant runoff is a core issue for the statehood Green Party, and I think progressives in general. We feel like it does allow you to vote for your preferred candidate, and then, as you said, the winning candidate would have a greater plurality. So I don't think any system is perfect. Obviously, bullet voting is a problem, and having the fair elections money has created these huge fields like it did in War II, for example. So I definitely support ranked choice voting. And let me add, at one point that people were trying to get ranked choice voting for the school board races because those are like 7 or 8 people, and that would have been a good model for us to try that.
All right. Thank you. We're going to move to Vince Orange, do you want to weigh in?
Yes, I agree with Councilmember White on this about the bullet voting. However, I am open to some form of runoffs. I think that would be a lot fair. And also this time I am a fair elections candidate as well, which means that we had to go out and get 250 DC residents to provide contributions from $5 to $100 max. And we had to get an aggregate of $12,000. So the fair elections program does work. And I'm a part of that as well. And glad to see that Monica is a part of it as well.
All right. Thank you. We're going to move on to the next question. Would you support a ban on flavored e-cigarette products? Raise your hand if you support a ban on flavored e-cigarettes. All right. Looks like we have a united front on that issue. So we're going to move on to the next one. Would you support congestion pricing to reduce traffic and to encourage the use of alternatives to cars? So raise your hand if you support the idea of congestion pricing in DC.
Could I ask for a clarification, Fennet?
Yes.
Do you mean strictly within our borders or in access points to the district?
Within our borders.
Within our borders, okay.
All right, Councilmember White, you offered support for that idea. Why?
Well, as all DC residents know, it's difficult for us to really get compensated for the amount that out-of-state folks use our services. So we, the district residents, carry too much of the share, too much of the burden of what they do. In the District of Columbia, if we continue to improve our infrastructure with dedicated bus lanes, with bike lanes, and making commuting easier, and shared car services, then district residents can get around more easily. We don't have as much pollution, and those folks driving will generally be out-of-state folks, and that will be money that will come into our revenue stream.
Monica Palacio, you seem to draw a distinction
Yeah.
there. So can you expand more on under what circumstances you would or would not be supportive of congestion pricing?
Well, yes, I would not be supportive if it punishes poor people who don't live near a metro station or a bus line, and then they're driving and they drive into a congested area and they get a fine or a fee. But I totally support the idea of outside drivers, particularly Maryland, Virginia license plates, driving into the district, crowding up our streets. We can't charge them a toll the way we would in New York City or New Jersey, which I would love to do. But I do think that I would be very weary of any legislation that has a disproportionate impact on low-income families.
And then these
Eric Rogers, you can connect.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Monica's saying, you know, I live in Ward 7. I live on Southern Avenue. And all of us who live on the outer ring of the city, you know, we're not close to metro stations. You know, you either have to drive to a metro station or take the bus to a metro station, or we're not close to public transit, or you have to walk significantly to the significant lines. So, you know, as Monica was saying, it punishes us who live in the outer ring. You know, this issue surfaced because of the population growth that we've seen in the gentrified neighborhoods. And these are issues that folks who live in the gentrified neighborhoods are trying to solve without thinking about the impact on the rest of us who've been pushed out to the outer rings, who don't have, you know, the money to live downtown, live next to Mount Vernon Square, live next to a metro, live next to Waterfront and Southwest, you know, so we do rely on our cars to get to and from work. And it's unfair to piggyback two issues, congestion pricing as well as climate change, you know, and put that on the backs of poor residents in the city. And I'm sorry, I don't support it.
Thank you. Claudia Bargan, where do you stand?
Yeah, I mean, I also don't support it, but I would actually put in some statistics behind it. 48% of all immigrants don't own a car in the district. 48% of all immigrants don't own a car. So the narrative that low-income people are driving cars, it's not, in terms of immigrants, that's not necessarily true. We're actually doing a lot for our climate and for the environment. The problem is the people who are moving into the district and using the Ubers, right? Those Ubers are the ones that are killing our environment right now. So we really need to focus on the gentrification and the causes of gentrification and the impacts of gentrification. I think that's a better narrative to understand, and also not constantly assume that, you know, low-income people are having to, you know, carry these burdens, but, you know, we're actually doing our part. We're good. We're actually good, and we're doing it.
With that, I'm gonna Vince Orange, you want to weigh in on this issue too?
Yes, I would just simply say that our elected officials have to stop catering to non-residents. 2/3 of the workforce that comes into this city, they get their money in Washington, D.C., and they go back to Maryland, Virginia, and are not subject to D.C. taxation. In addition, we spend $160 million now to provide paid leave benefits to 322,000 non-residents. $160 million. We can use that $160 million in the District of Columbia, educating our children, providing more housing, and working for the homeless. Our elected officials are not, for some reason, they're just caught up into non-residents. They spend our expendable budget for people in Michigan, California, and other places. And, you know, really, it's a shame. It's DC first. Trap our dollars at the border and let the DC dollars circulate from community to community. That's the only way that all boats are going to ride.
All right, so this discussion on congestion pricing is really getting us more insight on where candidates stand on issues.
And I think Ann Wilcox was trying to get in.
Yes, I was segueing into letting her talk. But,
okay, sorry. The women are outspoken tonight, so I'm kind of stepping in.
Since we're having a good
No,
discussion on equity and climate change and environmental policy,
Yes.
let's have all the candidates weigh in. So next up is Ann Wilcox.
is this still on the congestion
Yes,
tax?
congestion
or-
pricing.
Okay. Congestion pricing. Okay, I'm not an expert on this, but someone in my party is David Schwartzman. He feels very strongly. It's my understanding that it works in London and in European cities, and so I think we should try it. I realize what we should de-incentivize having cars. I think it's better to live near public transportation, and we should discourage car ownership in the
Thank you,
cities.
Mario
I
Cristaldo.
support it.
What do you
So
think
I'll
about
just want to say that as you just pointed out, that this issue can be very important in terms of understanding what our comprehensive plan really is of the city and where our dollar and evidently we the transportation areas, how is that we want everybody to come in and out, live, whether you are in Ward 7 and 8 or you are in Ward 1 and 4. So I believe that also we need to move forward because of the environment requires we are more careful about how we manage our transportation systems, the way we are, and then we need to keep educating our folks about the importance of that, no matter what part of the economic ladder we are.
Thank you. The next question is going to be for all the candidates, and this one comes from our audience. What agency do you see as the poorest performing in DC government, and what would you do as a council member to address the issues? We'll start off with Claudia Barragan.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you very well.
The question is, what agency in DC government is the poorest performing, and what would you do as a council member to address it?
Oh, definitely the police. I think the police department, and specifically, I mean, most public safety agencies. DPW also does policing. So anything that's related to policing in the district has not really done a good job in protecting all residents, especially youth, Black youth, brown youth. So I think that there needs to be more oversight of those agencies. And finally, we have a new mayor deputy of public safety, because that was a problem for a very long time. Mr. Donahue was doing a horrid job in that particular agency, and the mayor didn't really care to hold him accountable for it. So hopefully now we'll have someone that can actually stand up for us and not over policing.
Thank you. Next up is Mario Cristaldo.
I believe that we could do a much better job at the Department of Housing and Community. Because the issue of housing really being the number one issue for all of us in the last 10 years, to put it that way. Number one issue, affordable housing. Number one issue that we need to focus on is the lower part of the economic ladder. People at 30% of the AMI, the area median income, people at the 50% of the area, they need housing, and we need to strengthen our rent control, and we need our experts in rent control and also the Department of Housing and Community Development to give us the advice. We need to strengthen our inclusionary zoning laws, for example. And as a matter of fact, the council need to do much better in that perspective. I believe that we can increase at least 30% of the inclusionary zoning to be dedicated to affordable housing. So that's the area that I think the agency that I'm going to be focusing on from day one.
Thank you. Vince Orange, what do you think is the agency in DC government that's poorest performing?
I'm going to say it's the Office of Contracts and Procurement. I was amazed at the response from the Attorney General yesterday, a couple of days ago, indicating, well, he confirmed that Office of Contracts and Procurement has been violating the law for 15 years when they do subcontracting. 35% of every contract is supposed to have a subcontracting arrangement, and that 35% goes to CBEs. They are now asking the Contracts Appeals Board to look the other way Yes, we've been violating the law for 15 years. They have the audacity to say in their filing that they're going to get the council to change the law back in January of 2021. It's the most absurd thing I ever heard in my life. They intentionally have been violating this law. And everyone here on this panel, if you need housing, you need the access language, you need the environment, it's the common denominator, funding. You need money. And the business community must generate those dollars in order for you to utilize those dollars to address your concerns. And Office of Contracts and Procurement has let us down, and now it's documented. There's an 11-page filing to the Contracts Appeals Board that justifies and certifies that we passed the law and this government intentionally violated for 15 years.
Thank you. Ann Wilcox?
Yes, thank you. There are several, I mean, I'm not trying to bash DC government workers. I think they work hard, but there's so many areas of quality control that need to be looked at. You know, sending out an elections mailer that made no sense, couldn't be mailed back is one example. Inspections of, like the Kennedy Street fire was a place which should have been inspected, should have been dealt with. But I really want to mention this Office of Unified Communications, because it really is a spot that the council needs to work on. You've got ambulances being sent to the wrong quadrant on a regular basis, or they don't seem to know what the address is to begin with. And this is costing people's health and people's lives. You know, it goes back to the Rosenbaum case where Mr. Rosenbaum was, you know, not treated well. And so they had like a consent agreement, but none of those reforms seem to have come to pass. So that's, and the mayor and others say, oh, we have the best OUC, but I think it's far from that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask all the candidates to make sure you're muted until it's your turn to speak, as we do seem to be having some echo and playback. So next up is Monica Palacio. You were an agency director. Which of the other agencies do you think is poorest performing, and what would you do as a council member to address it?
Right. So as an agency director, I fought for 6 years, year after year, to make sure my budget was never cut and I was successful. But also my agency at times was not receiving all the resources we needed because the council would pass bills and nobody would fund them. So it is frustrating to be an agency director and be on the receiving end of work without resources and infrastructure to carry it out. But I would have to agree that I was highly frustrated with the Office of Contracts and Procurement along an entire continuum of problems, not only identifying the contractors, but overspending on those contracts. Even when I went through a renovation of my own agency, I had to fight to make sure those contracts are delivered on what they were paying to do with our tax dollars. So I'm not surprised to hear from Mr. Orange that they're finally being called out and the Attorney General's going after them for violating the law. It doesn't surprise me at all. But I also want to point out the Department of Behavioral Health has recently gone through some transition in leadership. And I think that there's been a real missed opportunity to serve district residents in terms of the mental health and behavioral health services they need.
Thank you. Councilmember Robert White, what do you see as the poorest performing agency? And let me ask, what have you done to address it?
So what I want to be careful of is to not demoralize the people that work for our government agencies. In every agency, regardless of what you think about it, there are people who believe in the mission of that agency, and I don't want them to hear me say they're doing a terrible job. I could give you significant criticisms of every single agency in DC government because it's my job to understand it. My most significant, I think the most relevant issues that we're facing that we need to focus on are our public schools and our Department of Employment Services. You cannot fix everything in a government at once. And if you try to fix everything at once, you fail at fixing anything. If we concentrate our efforts on improving our schools and improving our employment process, you're going to help incomes in this city. You're going to reduce crimes in this city. You're going to prevent more displacement in this city. And so instead of trying to fix everything or demoralize any particular agency, we have to focus the attention and the resources of our government on schools and getting people to work. And that is a place that our agencies in charge of those things have fallen short. And until they say, yes, we are falling short and we're willing to work with the council in this city to fix these things, instead of always playing defense and saying we're doing everything right, until that happens, I think we're going to continue to fall short.
Did we lose Bennett?
I'm gonna take over. I'm asking the questions now, folks.
You back?
He says he's coming back, but I would agree with Council Member White. It can be demoralizing to constantly be on the receiving end of criticism when you're working hard day after day, but we need accountability and we need high standards. And I think in my experience, the large majority of government employees, 70, 80% really care. And then there's some folks that have stopped caring and they have to be held accountable. They need to do their job.
Exactly.
All right, the runaway moderator is now back after accidentally Xing out of the screen. So that gave Eric Rogers ample time to prepare his answer. So
Thank you.
what do you see as the worst performing agency?
I have to agree with Vio and Monica and go with OCP. Having worked as chief of staff at DSLBD, we worked hand in glove with OCP in setting the expendable budget and monitoring agency contracting. And like Councilmember White said, I'm not trying to demoralize good staff who are really trying to do a good job. But running an agency, you have to have a clear vision on what you want to do. And you have the mechanisms of government that support those agencies has to be there. So whether it's Office of Contracts and Procurement, or the Mayor's Office of Legal Counsel for legal support, or whether it's the Office of the Department of Personnel or Personnel Department, all of those agencies have to work in hand in glove with the main agency to get service delivered. My second agency, to be honest with you, is DOES, and I echo exactly what Councilmember White said. We need to make sure that our workforce development system is, a 21st century workforce development system. And when I sat on the Workforce Investment Council as a staff member at DSLBD, I saw a lot of the challenges that the WIC had through DOES in trying to get a lot of our hard to reach and hard to employ residents jobs. And I do think it's time for a new thinking at DOES. And Dr. Morris is doing a decent job.
Thank you.
Nothing to do with Dr. Morris, but it's time to think differently.
Thank you. And to continue on this somewhat negative streak of questionings, what do you believe is the biggest mistake made by the DC Council in recent years? And how would you have acted differently? We'll start off with Vincent Orange.
I think the biggest mistake is the Universal Paid Leave Act and disregarding Councilmember Mary Chay's legislation that would have treated residents and non-residents alike. It was a major mistake not to bring in universal paid leave and fund it the way the 50 states fund it, as opposed to putting it on the business community, making the business community pay $160 million to allow 322,000 non-DC residents receive benefits to bond with their newborn child for 8 weeks, 6 weeks to take care of a family member, or 2 weeks for their own personal issues, while excluding 94,000 DC residents that pay taxes and work every day. It's unbelievable. But Mary Chay had the right bill, and it's not too late to try to correct it. Now that the UPL is in place, we can go on the other track and create a better funding stream and recapture that $160 million, and everyone can have universal paid leave.
Thank you. Councilmember White, you back the Universal Paid Leave Act. Can you address some of Vince Orange's concerns before you answer the question of what you think the biggest mistake made by the DC Council is?
Sure. I'm the Democratic nominee. Paid family leave is part of the Democratic platform nationally for a reason. It's important. Social justice has to be our mission. This isn't something that we should play politics with. It's something that we need to do not just in DC, but across the nation. And if everybody says, well, we shouldn't set the example, somebody else should set the example, then no one sets it and we don't progress. But in terms of the biggest mistake I think that the DC Council has made is allowing the mayor to close Washington Met School. Again, I'm going to tell you, educating our kids is the most important thing we do in this city. There are some kids who just don't succeed in our traditional schools. They've been put out, they've gone to the criminal justice system, but they had a place to land, a place that was going to take care of them, push them every day across that graduation stage. Washington Met was that school. but because they didn't produce at the same metrics, nor did they get the same support from the city as other schools, the city decided to close them. What we're going to see of many of those students, we're going to see them dead, we're going to see them incarcerated, and some of that has happened already. It's going to break my heart for the rest of my life that we weren't able to save Washington Met.
And before I move on to the next candidate, does anyone disagree on the issue of the closure of Washington Met that wants to weigh in on that? Okay, so next up is Claudia Barragan. What do you believe is the biggest mistake made by the DC Council in recent years?
Yes, it forgot to listen to residents first. Most of the legislature that's placed in council right now is pushed by special interest groups. We no longer hear from residents, and especially those historic, long established, rooted families, Black, brown families that have been in the district. All of these new legislature is coming from places like London, places like California, places like somewhere else, not necessarily rooted legislative issues that are here from the district. One really important thing to understand is the impact of displacement and this issue of disenfranchising residents, because displacement is about income, right? So even if we have great education, if those kids can't afford to live in the city, they're gonna be displaced. We're already been seeing a lot of highly educated Black men and Black women leaving the city because they can't afford to live in the city. And that is coming from these special interest groups. And by the way, a lot of them are nonprofits. We need to start listening to residents only. And that's my priority, to listen to residents only. And legislature can be in different languages also, by the way. So.
Thank you. Next up is Eric Rogers.
I think it's more of a broad answer I have to the question. And I think that the biggest mistake that the council has done in recent years that I could tell is the type of oversight that I'm used to and accustomed to when I first came through the council. When I first came through the council, you had Sharon Ambrose, Kathy Patterson, David Catania, who understood government operations and understood the mission and focus of each agency and held each agency to that particular standard. Now it seems that similar to what Claudia was saying, that the council is more interested in promoting an agenda, promoting a particular checkbox on some national groups or regional groups issue, as opposed to focusing in on just basic operations. I look at my old agency at DCRA and listening to some of the questions about the Kennedy Street fire and how things happen. An active and in tune council would know the answers, would understand the process of how a housing plan goes through, and the role of FEMS and the role of the MPD and the role of DCRA inspectors. So the biggest complaint and issue that I have is conducting that oversight and understanding at that minutia level of exactly how the government runs, what it's supposed to do, and whether or not we want to continue to go in a particular direction.
Thank you. Next up is Monica Palacio.
My answer is a little bit broader as well. As someone who was on the receiving end of numerous unfunded bills with the expectation that the work would get done, that horribly undermines an agency director and an agency that's trying to deliver services to the residents of the district. I understand that we have lean years. But when I look at some agencies like DOES, for example, who would sometimes transfer money to my agency and say, we didn't get around to doing this, but here, can you use the money for this, right? Literally, that would happen. I appreciated receiving that funding, but it was desperately needed because I was, chronically underfunded, and my mandate, the council would end up passing these very ceremonial bills with important outcomes that were needed, but not with the, corresponding resources. So I think something like $1 billion in bills have been passed where there was no funding attached. So that's just an insult to both government operations and district residents who need those services.
Exactly.
Thank you. Mario Cristaldo, what do you believe is the biggest mistake made by the council in recent years? Oh, you're muted.
Unmuting myself. Okay, I guess I'm back. All right, great. So I was going to say that I think really is sad that we wouldn't allow restaurant workers to get luck
I'm sorry, you've been breaking
given
up.
to other. Um, I believe that we can do better than that. Excuse
Sorry,
me.
Mr. Castaldo,
So again, initially, if you can you listen to me now? Am I okay now?
I think you're okay now. If you can start again from the beginning.
Okay. I was gonna say that I think the biggest mistake made by the council is the issue of Initiative 77, the ballot that was approved at first to raise the minimum wage for restaurant services and other tip workers in the District of Columbia, and then backing off on the issue. I think that's the biggest mistake, that we need low-income families to move up and to get a just, fair, as everybody else, and they should have given the opportunity to get that full pay that we don't have for them now. And the other issues, and that's why it's so important, other issues like term limits and other issues. I don't know if we're going to be able to have time to discuss any of that, but we also need term limits in the city, and not discussing any of that at city council level. That's disappointing as well.
Thank you. And Wilcox, what do you see as the biggest mistake made by the council?
Right. Well, I'll save time because I was also going to say Initiative 77. I think we had a forum last week with the bar and restaurant workers, and it's my position that, and our party's position that, the wages rise overall, and that studies have shown in California and Utah and other states that wages rise when you have one fair wage, and everyone benefits, as Mario just said. So I won't repeat those points, but I think the council was listening to, corporate owners and the bar owners and scaring people with, saying they were going to cut jobs and so forth. So I think that not Mr. White, but other council members showed a lot of cowardice in overturning that initiative. So thank you.
Thank you. And this segues well into our next section, which is another rapid fire round where I'm going to ask candidates where they stand on several bills in recent years where the council was closely divided. And among them was the repeal of Initiative 77, which passed on an 8-5 vote. So we already know where some of the candidates stand on this issue, but raise your hand if you would have voted to repeal Initiative 77. All right, so we have some disagreement here. Let's start off with Monica Palacio. Why do you support repeal?
Well, I think that as a council, we have to listen to the needs and concerns of our workers and our residents. And overwhelmingly, when I spoke to restaurant workers and individuals, because the Office of Human Rights was actually played a certain role in that piece of legislation, so I tracked it very closely, and I heard over and over again how much the workers didn't want this initiative passed. So I know that in the long run, we should always have a patient perspective about the benefits that will accrue to people once there's a minimum wage, and I agree with that. But everything exists in context, and I don't think we can look now during the time of COVID back a year or two and say, hey, wouldn't it be nice to have this now? I mean, circumstances have changed dramatically, but listening to workers, I think, is our number one role when it comes to legislation like this.
Thank you. Councilmember White, you voted against the repeal. Can you respond to some of the concerns raised by Ms. Palacio?
Yeah, so I think as a policy matter, we agree. I spoke to workers as well, and overwhelmingly, I reached out in every way I could think of. Overwhelmingly, the workers said that they did not support increasing the tip minimum wage, that they worried about the impact that it would have on their careers, their ability to make money and retain jobs. But after the voters voted, I have to respect the will of the voters. Look, I've lost an election before. I thought the voters got it wrong, but they voted, and we respect the outcome of that vote. That's what we do in a democracy. So I'm not comfortable overturning the will of the voters, even if I, as a policy matter, disagree.
Eric Rogers, how do you respond to that, to the point that Robert White made, that voting to repeal is essentially a thumb in the nose of voters?
No, and I'm sensitive to that too, and understand, that perspective. But, at the end of the day, the folks who are impacted by the policy spoke loudest. So even if, the will of the voters, was what it was, the folks who were mainly impacted said no. And I do think it's incumbent upon the council from time to time, not often, from time to time, to step in and do that, because sometimes we can get it wrong as the will of the voters, as the mass. And listening to, like Councilmember White, I was there in 2018 working alongside a lot of the folks, fighting against Initiative 77. And the main thing that they kept telling me was, all the outside coming in and dictating to our electorate what is good for them, when the folks who are most impacted are saying, no, we have a system in place. It's working for us. We can move through this particular system. And I do feel, because the council's done it a couple of times. One time I didn't agree with it with term limits, when the voters voted for term limits about 20 years ago. I do think that aspect of the law heard. But on this issue, if you're significantly, the folks who are significantly impacted, whose livelihoods are significantly impacted, you got to listen to them first.
Thank you. And then Mario Cristaldo, you had raised this issue earlier. What's your response to some of the concerns here that the vast majority of tip workers who reached out to the council said they didn't want Initiative 77?
I would understand that. I've been in the council myself. As a matter of fact, I was staff for Council Member Anita Bonds for a period of time, and I understand, the power of the lobbyists that we're experiencing, that we really want to tackle down sometimes, because they make you sound like it's a great voice, a bigger voice, when in reality there's a big number of residents of the districts that are doing the hard work here, and they're not getting the fair shot in this situation. So I would argue against the big lobbyists and others, and let's see if we can empower our communities in organizing our neighborhoods and having a better discussion of some of the issues. That's exactly what the type of conversation I want to hear at the city council, instead of the biggest and powerful lobbyists. Thank you.
Vince Orange, it looks like you want to jump in. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And once again, this is why we need institutional knowledge on the council. There was a deal made. We got the $15 per hour minimum wage passed. We got the tip wage workers 5 days of sick leave. Their tip minimum wage was $2.77 an hour. We doubled that. But there's a misnomer. Everyone gets $15 per hour minimum wage. The Working Families organization, they fooled the people. They got them thinking that they're not entitled to $15 per hour minimum wage. It just means that in that hour, if you make $7, the owner has to give you the other $8. You are guaranteed the $15 minimum wage. And that's the reason why those that were in the know were so outraged, because everybody gets the $15 minimum wage. And then what you're going to do is try to limit the others from getting big tips. The District of Columbia will never make bridges. They will never build cars, but you will have great restaurants. You will have great theaters. That's what makes the District of Columbia grow. And those tips are a major part of the workers' livelihood that provides them quality of life.
Claudia Barragan, can you remind me where you stood on this issue of repeal?
So I actually went and grabbed signatures throughout for 77. So yeah, no, I do think the will of the people needs to be pushed. But one of the important things, what was just said, so talking to immigrants in their language, right? And because one is an immigrant, people don't get paid $15 an hour. That's not a given. Right now, there's people who work $7 an hour.
Hold on, we'll have an opportunity for response. Let's let Claudia finish her answer.
Thank you. So one of the issues that I had with this particular, how the whole thing went out, is that the people that were coming into council and talking were not necessarily the people who I was talking to who were immigrants, who are not making those $15 an hour, right? Who right now during COVID are seriously struggling. So many people have lost their jobs, right? So this is a big issue, because when we were thinking then, we weren't thinking about COVID then, right? Look where we are right now. But I didn't appreciate the fact that people were speaking on behalf of others, and that really made me uncomfortable about the whole thing. Because again, we should really listen to those who are like the most impacted, the people who are currently not making $15 an hour, who are barely making it alive right now.
And finish. That's the reason why we passed the wage theft legislation that the Attorney General just utilized several weeks ago to recover $13,000 in lost wages. Folks just don't understand. You are entitled to $15 an hour. And if you don't get $15 an hour, you ought to go see Carl Ray Sink. He's looking
for the DOES. That's the whole thing with DOES.
Why we passed that law. I wrote the legislation. Wage legislation can get you your money.
Okay, thank you. We are running close to the end here, so I want to move on to some other issues. So over the summer, there was an amendment to the budget proposed that would have raised the income tax on the highest earners in order to address some of the city's budget problems. Raise your hand if you support raising the income tax on the highest earners. All right, so we have some differences there. Eric Rogers, I believe you do not support raising the tax on the highest earners?
Not as proposed. Again, having this 20 years of experience in government, the whole purpose in my mind is to look for revenue for the programs that we want. But the biggest thing that I think that we need to do as a government or as a council is do effective oversight. Scrub the budget, scrub the agencies, make sure the agencies are spending the money as they're supposed to spend the money on the services that we're expecting them to do, and to get the service levels that we're expecting. If and when we do that, and we have gone through and we have the most efficient government possible, then I'm open to looking at our taxing structure to see where we may need additional revenue for additional programs and the like. But right now, I don't think it's the appropriate time to start raising taxes on the highest income earners. We had a tax revision commission some years ago that set the standards the tax levels as they are now. It was done by compromise, so every interest group in the world that you can think of had the ability to have their say so, and that's the taxing structure that we have now. It has worked very well for us up until COVID. So what we need to focus on is getting out of COVID, making sure that we're tightening up our belts, with government spending. And then after that, if there's issues that we need to work through with increased taxes, I might be open to it. But as it was proposed, no.
And Wilcox, so what do you make of Eric's points?
Oh, she loves him. I love her.
Ann Wilcox?
I think she's frozen.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you now.
We think we support reversing tax. Can you hear?
You are breaking up on us. You are breaking up on us.
Can't hear me? Okay, I'll have to. I thought I have it on the.
You're good now.
Okay, I'm gonna try. Can you hear me a little better now or no?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, let me just try this. Sorry. I just switched computers. We support reversing the Trump tax cuts. We don't think those tax cuts were necessary in the first place a couple of years ago, and that those should be reversed. And we also support the idea of raising taxes on the top 10%. A lot of the things that the Tax Reform Commission did were not, in the interest of the working people and poor people. So we definitely agreed with Charles Allen's position, among other cuts that he proposed.
Monica Palacio, what do you make of the argument that the wealthiest in the city can afford to pay a little bit more in taxes?
I think we already have a tax base that is overtaxed in this city. I don't think that we should impose an additional tax when someone earns, to be considered wealthy in the district, you have to make more than $100,000 a year. You have to make six figures. And there are people who make $100,000 a year who are also struggling to keep up with paying their bills or paying healthcare costs and paying their mortgages. So I think we need a program where people can opt in, like a mini bonds program. So if they have disposable income and they want to purchase a $10,000 bond to invest in the recovery of the city, let them do that.
Councilmember White, I believe you voted for the amendment to raise the income tax on the highest earners. What do you make of the arguments against it?
As a general matter, I understand the arguments against it. Prior to this year, I voted against tax increases. However, this proposal was to increase taxes on individual people making more than $250,000 a year, and their taxes would have only gone up a couple $100s. As I said earlier, right now is a time where the people at the lower end of the income spectrum are suffering so much more than the people at the higher end. And if we have massive layoffs and massive evictions, that is going to have such a crippling effect on our city. And we have to have safety nets to help and catch these people. That's what it means to live in a community. Those of us who have more sometimes will have to give more. But I do also want to note that as an agency chair, I scrutinize and cut the budgets of the agencies under me religiously. If they can't 100% justify the spending, I cut it. That's something we have to see more of across the council. But right now, not a year from now, not one day, not after we have another tax revision commission, right now, people need help. And so right now we have to
Thank you. And the next question is going to be for all the candidates. And it's an important question given the moment that we're in. Does the District of Columbia have too many police officers, as many protesters in recent months have contended? We'll start off with Vince Orange.
Well, I would say no, and I really would like to spend my time, because I didn't get to answer the other question about raising taxes on the wealthy. Now, in the District of Columbia, we use those individuals, we want to keep them in the city because they help the tax base. How do we get our revenue? Individual taxes, sales taxes, property taxes. We changed our policy with the Tax Revision Committee to increase the state tax exemption from 2 million to 5 million to keep that population in the city. I can't understand what Councilman White is saying, because on the reverse hand, he's saying let's spend $160 million to take care of non-residents through universal paid leave. Out of a $250 million tax, only $90 million goes to DC residents. And when you break it down, it's disproportionate. People.
Can you address the question on policing now?
I indicate to you, I believe that we have adequate police. We need to get rid of the aggressive tools that they utilize, because those should be outlawed. We need to make sure we don't have police brutality. And so I agree with that. I agree there needs to be some reform, but we do need police officers in the District of Columbia.
Thank you. Councilmember White, does the District of Columbia have too many police officers?
Yes, this is the most critical time in our country's history since 1960 on the issue of racial justice, and we have to be ashamed of ourselves if we miss the importance of this moment. Right now, if you make a right turn on red, police have exclusive jurisdiction. If you have a mental health crisis and need help, police show up. If you have a call for public intoxication or noise complaint, police show up. We don't need police for all of these things. If we focus the efforts of police on public safety and we're smarter about how we deal with other things, have other agencies take care of traffic issues, nonviolent issues, then not only would we reduce our policing budget significantly, but we would handle these issues better and have less people of color interacting with the criminal justice system. This is something we just can't brush to the side. This moment is too important.
Eric Rogers, does DC have too many police officers?
He's muted.
You're muted.
No, we don't have too many police officers. And the thing that folks keep forgetting is that police officers are law enforcement. What we need to focus on is changing Title 22. Similar to what Councilmember White's saying, it makes no sense that you can go to jail today for 3 days or a $50 fine if you operate without a business license. So the MPD, I've used MPD to go in and arrest small business owners because they didn't have a business license. We need to change the law. We need to change the law so that the law is fair, so that we don't have police doing, like Councilmember White is saying, interacting with folks on these types of issues. So it's not a question of the number, because we are the nation's capital. We do have certain obligations for safety of the federal government, which I do think we need to maintain. What we need to focus on beyond criminal justice reform is changing the law and focusing more on getting away from crime and punishment and more to prevention and rehabilitation. If we do that, then the agents of government will be used appropriately. We don't need to, everything that we're doing with criminal justice right now is touching the surface. Do the hard work, get into Title 22, get into our criminal code. Don't worry about what Congress is going to do once it sits up there for 60 days. Focus in on how we as a community value our criminal code and what we want out of our criminal code. And then a lot of these issues of police contact will go away.
Mario Cristaldo, you're next.
Yes. I want to say that to answer your question, yes, we do have too many police officers for the District of Columbia. If we're going to continue to do the same thing, and if we're not going to change to a community policing style, we need to start from the academy, demilitarizing our police forces and making more investments in other areas as community organizing to better deal with crime and other issues. We need to revise our laws and also make sure that we're really investing in our communities with community policing. So that's what we need to do in terms of policing in the District of Columbia.
Thank you. Claudia Barragan, you previously mentioned police as the poorest performing agency. Does the city have too many police officers?
Yes, they do. I think we need to connect also population and our increase in population, and specifically wealthy population and gentrification, with the onset of more policing in the district. And it's not just more policing, it's also more security guards, right? But many people new to the city believe that security guards and police officers are their personal security guard. In my district, as an ANC in my neighborhood, every 4 weeks I have to stop unfair stop and frisks and illegal searches of my neighbors, Black neighbors, right? My neighborhood is 90% African American and Latino and immigrant. And every single police officer that comes here, and it's usually 10 of them, and half of them are white, and all of them don't live in the district. And I specifically ask all of them, one more thing. Last year and the year before and the year before then, there was only one police officer that would speak Amharic in the district, only one. So we really need to start looking at police reform in their training and all of that.
Thank you. Monica Palacio, does the city have too many police officers?
My answer is no. And I think that's because we have to agree, change takes time. You don't turn off the switch and take all the police officers on the street. Do we have too many police officers that are still probably acting in violation of their code of behavior and code of ethics? Probably yes. I believe we should have a human rights code of ethics for police behavior. One strike, you're out. One use of force that's documented, investigated, you're out. We should have zero tolerance for police officers that break the code, but we need to transition to an entirely new model of protecting and serving our residents. And we're not going to do that from one budget to the next. That's not going to happen.
Thank you. And to round out this discussion, Ann Wilcox, does the district have too many police officers? Ann, are you with us? Looks like your video might be frozen.
Again, yeah.
All right, it looks like we're having some technical difficulties with Anne. If we get her back, we can have her answer the question. That was the last question for the question for the evening. So thank you for all the candidates for coming out. So I'm going to now turn the table over to Donna Purchase, and if we get Anne back and we can get her answer to the question.
I guess not.
And while we wait for Donna, I'll just remind the audience tonight that in November, you get 2 choices for at-large candidates. So if there are multiple candidates here who you really liked, you don't have to just pick one. You can pick 2 of them.
Hi, thank you. And if Anne does pop on, I will pause for a moment. I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you for all of the time, your thoughtful responses, and good luck to everybody. As you know, we have 2 more forums coming up for this large slate. So I hope you'll tune in and listen to your to the other candidates. Bennett, I don't know what to say about you. You are phenomenal. We so appreciate you. We appreciate your questions. And we appreciate the time that you have donated, not just tonight, but in the past to SWANA. And we hope to keep you on our go-to list. Thank you so much. Okay, did we still lose Anne? I wanted to give her that chance. Well, you may have seen on the banners how to contact any of the candidates. I hope you wrote down that information. If you want to tweet them, email them, check out their websites, please do so. If you are having trouble getting in contact with a candidate, please email me at president@swana.org, and we will make sure that we connect you to the candidate you want to speak to. Again, thank you, everybody. Good night. Best of luck. And remember, to our audience, I want to tell you, our audience grew tonight during the forum. So we know that more people than registered actually picked it up on Facebook and YouTube. Remember, everyone, vote, vote, vote. I think we're 50 days away now. So it's important. We hope that you'll listen, be educated, and make the best decision for you. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Orange, number 2 on the ballot.
21. It's a good time. Good time.
It's a good time. It's a good evening.
I miss these days when we're going back and forth, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, there's Anne. If we could take another